Welcome, everybody who is just joining us for our 23rd Spirit of the Time. We are so excited to be joined by Mike Davis today, and we will get started right at the top of the hour. Welcome. Again, for those just joining us, welcome to Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time. We are about to get started with Mike Davis on our time machine. Stay tuned. Welcome to Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time. We're excited to have you here today. You guys are in for a treat as we fly with Mike Davis. Welcome to Zeitgeist Spirit of the Time. This is our flight number 23. We are so excited to have the legendary Mike Davis on our time machine today. We will get started right at the top of the hour. To those just joining us, welcome to Zeitgeist, the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. We are about to time travel with Mike Davis. We'll get started right at the top of the hour. Welcome to Zeitgeist Design and Production. I'm Becky Kiefer, Studio Director, and today's flight attendant. Time travel is the ultimate immersive experience. VR, AR, and the metaverse all pale in comparison to the notion of sailing across the seas of time and space. And here in the Zeitgeist Creative Studio, aka R&J's Time Travel Emporium, imagination rules and time is always of the essence. This is where immersion artists Ryan Harmon and Joe Lancicero study the past and spin the present, envisioning the future story dwelling and what we call UXIRL, user experiences in real life. The Spirit of the Time Zoomcast offers a sneak peek behind the themes. And each month, we move you without a ride system, inviting one incredibly talented and influential colleague aboard our time machine. We set the controls for milestone moments in that person's career and attempt to unravel the mystery of what makes a guest experience timely yet timeless. And because we're live, you can type questions into the chat box and our passenger will answer them in an off-the-record Q&A after the hour. So climbing aboard our time machine today is a man of music, theater, and spectacle who led the live entertainment divisions of both Disneyland, Universal Studios Japan for some 20 years each, and served as the SVP of International Entertainment for Universal Parks and Resorts. Mike Davis produced such beloved and award-winning productions as Fantasmic, Beauty and the Beast, and The Hunchback of Notre Dame. At the Disneyland Resort and Universal Studios Japan, he produced all live entertainment for 2 decades, including stage shows, projection-mapped holiday celebrations, and parades. Most recently, Mike served as the leader of the creative and production for all live entertainment at Universal Studios Beijing, where he provided overall creative and production leadership and served as the creative director for the recent Thea Award winner, Untrainable, his 6th Thea Award while at Universal, and also received, 12 IAAPA Brass Ring awards during his illustrious 4-decade career in themed industry. So now it's my pleasure to introduce our time machine pilots, Zeitgeist President and Chief Creative Officer, Ryan Harmon, and Zeitgeist Executive Vice President and Chief Art Director, Joe Lancicero, along with a man who has a very special story about working with Hollywood diva Elizabeth Taylor, Mike Davis.
Wow, we are we're here.
Back in 1992.
The opening of Euro Disneyland in Paris. Well, come on, the Big Thunder there is so good. They have great Big Thunder.
The Eiffel Tower.
Oh, they have an awesome Pirates of the Caribbean. Oh, you can always see Paris. But well, what was cool about 1992, while so many people were focused on Euro Disney, our guest today was busy opening a little show here at Disneyland. Everyone might have heard of called Fantasmic. So we are very excited.
Without further ado, we want to welcome Mike. Welcome to the time machine.
Hi, Mike.
You have an incredible career, so much to cover. So let's set the
controls. I want to start maybe around why don't we start at 1962, 63? We're in Bakersfield, California. We got to get the dust off me here. And did you bring your boots? And you're playing guitar, and you're actually kind of good. What's going on here?
Well, I had the great opportunity to be exposed to music at a very young age. My parents were not musical in their own personal skills, but they loved music. So it was always kind of playing in the house and humming along the tunes that they liked. And so pretty early on, I gravitated to a guitar and singing. And so I started, getting in talent shows. And my dad would always book me in various places, rest homes. Probably the most interesting thing he ever did was he booked me on top of the snack shop at a drive-in theater, and I would be up there with my guitar playing between features, just try to find an audience. And so I had the great pleasure of being kind of in front of people and singing and stuff from childhood. So I got an early start in the arts.
Wow, and are you doing rock and roll, country, a little both?
Well, a little bit of both. My dad wanted me to always do country because both my parents are from Arkansas, They loved traditional country and Western. And of course, Bakersfield with Buck Owens, Merle Haggard. We were in kind of Nashville West. And so I was expected to kind of do that. But I'll never forget auditioning for the Ted Mack Amateur Hour when I was when I was in junior high school, and I did a song called "The Eve of Destruction," and it was a bit of a protest song. And my dad said, "That's a bad choice. That's bad song selection. You should pick something else." And I said, "Dad, I want to be, relevant and contemporary, and that's what's going on right now. It's the '60s." And of course, that audition didn't go so well, and I never got onto the show. But I learned a valuable lesson about, pick the right material. It's important.
Right. So then you went to UC Bakersfield, pretty good school, around 1970. What was your major there?
I was a major in music. So I studied all the traditional music classes, composing, conducting, all of that. A lot of back then, GE, general education classes that you had to take for the first couple of years.
Sure.
And after that, I transferred down to Long Beach State.
Oh, okay. And there, your major was?
Vocal performance. I had to back then, there was no jazz or pop programs that you can get in universities and colleges today. So I had to study opera. So I'll never forget having to sing for Dr. Neiswender, who was my vocal instructor in German and Italian and Latin. And then I would be gigging at Magic Mountain, Universal Studios, Knott's Berry Farm, Disneyland on the weekend, singing pop stuff. And then I'd have to go back in and try to be very legit.
Wow.
So
what was the name of your band?
Well, the name of the band was Sunday Afternoon. And if you can see the photo that's up, you'll see that there's an ice cream sundae on the pamphlet, and we all had that in our costumes. We actually used to rehearse when we all knew each other from elementary school, junior high, and high school. So we were chosen friends. And then we decided, because we're all involved in music, to put a band together in 1970. And
is that you with the fine perm and the stash?
No, that is me as the yellow costume Viking.
Okay.
Our costume designer hit that. And so we could only rehearse with school and jobs and stuff on Sunday afternoon. And the first time we performed at Magic Mountain in the Showcase Theater, it said Saturday at 2:00, Sunday afternoon, which was very confusing. So
hey, at least you got ABBA's costume designer.
We enlisted the help of a art designer, actually that had been an instructor at our high school in Bakersfield, and she put together Sunday as in chocolate Sunday. So we changed the spelling to Sundae. And of course, remember, this is in the 70s, so you still got a little bit of that was okay at that point. I'm not sure we would try to market a group called Sunday Afternoon with that logo today, but at the time it was fun, it was lighthearted, and successful for us.
Wow. So is it true you played 48 states? And so you were successful.
Well, successful in that we were working, and you can talk to any actor or musician today and say the first level of success is that I'm working, and then the next level depend on the next question is where are you working, right?
Right.
But typically it's how much are you working. So we were very fortunate to have different agents around the nation that could book us, where we were on the road outside of our hometown of Bakersfield, probably 45, 46 weeks a year. And through that 5 or 6 years that we were full-time on the road, we got a chance to get into every state but 2.
Wow.
That's
okay.
Awesome.
So 48 states, you're playing everywhere, but then in 1978, you get a call from somebody at Disneyland. What happened there?
Well, it ended up that some of the guys in the band were married and had children. And of course, when we traveled, all the families, all the dogs, everybody was on the road because that's where we lived. But the kids were getting old enough to be into school, which meant wives and children would have to be left behind for some of the band members. And that just was not something that they wanted to do. So after 8 years, the band disbanded, and I started looking for what would be that next thing. And at that time, you have to imagine, I'm 26. I'm talking to other musicians on the road that are 40, which seems ancient at that time. And they're saying, well, we're still doing the road, waiting for our big break. And I kind of woke up and said, I don't want to be that guy. And so I had a chance. We had played at Disneyland and Walt Disney World and had done theme parks as well as Vegas and different things. And as it worked out, I called Sonny Anderson's office at Disneyland, who was the casting talent booking director there. And he had booked my band at that time because we had played there in Florida. And he said, oh, you're looking for a job? And I said, oh, I'm looking for a position. The band's breaking up. And he said, come on in. And by the grace of good timing, as this industry depends on so frequently, 2 weeks later, I got offered a staff job as a casting talent booking assistant at Disneyland. And that started my Disney career in October of 1978. Had to cut my hair, had to buy a suit, remember how to tie a tie. There I am on like my first day in the office,
Wow.
And it began what was, 43 plus years of a great career, a great life, working with unbelievably talented people. Super thankful. Yeah.
So as an artist, would you say you had a more emotional sensitivity towards the live performers in the parks that maybe other managers didn't have?
No question. I've always in my career, when I'm interviewing people for positions throughout Disney and Universal, I always felt that it wasn't a requirement to have been an artist, but it certainly was a bonus and a plus if you knew what it's like. When I had to go talk to bands at Tomorrowland Terrace, and they would say, well, the schedule's kind of tough. I said, I don't know. I played this stage. I played it in Florida. I did 8 30-minute sets a day. That's what I did. So you can tell me you don't want to do it, but you can't tell me you can't do it. Because I've been there. But I also, I think I understood that when the guests come to a park, no matter what happens in the boardroom, the office, the design room, budget, restrictions, all those things that go into getting the show on the stage, in that moment, what will save you or kill you is the artist, because that's the last thing in the delivery chain. So starting as a casting director until the last day I worked at Universal, I was still working and improving casting for our parks in Asia. To me, that is so important that you get that person on the stage, that singer, dancer, actor, whatever performing role they're doing, to get someone that understands how important their role is of delivering the work of all that went before them.
Yeah. Well, and how great that you were able to let them know how important it is. Often leaders get lost in their own selves and don't have that moment to be able to pull back.
Well, listen, it's easy in the good times, and when you get into management, you have to manage the bad times as well. And I think when I had to deal with artists, they always knew that I understood. We didn't always agree, but it wasn't about we didn't agree because I didn't get it. I got it.
Yeah.
And I understood the dynamic of what it's like to perform on a day when you don't feel well, and you've got those options. I feel great. I got a bad audience. I feel bad. I have a bad audience. I feel bad. I have a great audience. We're all feeling bad. It's not going very well. And all emotional dynamics get into the performance. So yeah, I think it was very helpful for me in the relationships that I developed with other designers, whether it's lighting, sound, set, costume, special effects. I think the fact that they knew that I had the artist on the stage experience kind of helped in our communication.
Yeah. So we're in like the early 80s now, and you're in the office of Dennis Despy, who was a partner of our other flyer, Ron Miziker, for a while. And Dennis replaced the famous Bobbiani.
Yes.
And it sounds like you're having a conversation and he's asking you where you see yourself in a certain amount of time.
Yeah, it was interesting. I interviewed with Sonny Anderson, of course, but then I had to have a secondary interview in 1978, and it was with Dennis Despy, which I proceeded to call him Dennis Despay because I thought maybe he was French. I don't know. So I went into his office and sat down, and we were doing typical stuff. And he says, "Well, where do you see yourself in 5 years?" And I said, "Well, listen, I've been the leader of this band that I've been involved in for a long time, and I think maybe I see myself in a manager role. I believe I have leadership skills, and I'd like to maybe run a department." And he says, "Well, where do you see yourself in 15 years?" And I said, "Well, with all due respect, I would see myself in this office, sitting in that chair behind that desk."
That's chutzpah.
A little chutzpah for a 26-year-old who's just off the road, just cut his hair, and is gigging at night. And as it worked out, 15 years later, I was very fortunate to move into that office. The essence of Bobbiani oozing from the walls and all the things that he had done, and of course Dennis, and it felt like quite an accomplishment to be able to move into that office and kind of take that early management dream and have it come to life 15 years later.
Yeah, that's amazing. Wow. So then you went around 87, you became director of the entertainment division and
Yeah.
producer of all Disneyland entertainment. Tell us about what projects did you do that?
Well, back then, we were doing a lot of special events, and Disneyland always did shows and parades, and we were always trying to balance, which I think a lot of people do today as well. You're trying to balance tradition and innovation, and it's a bit of a slippery slope. People come to Disneyland expecting it, and of course, this was while I was at Disneyland, but people expect coming to see certain things, but you can't just always show them the same old thing. You've got to show them something new, and what is that recipe that balances those two things? And so we were doing seasonal events like State Fair, circus. We were certainly doing brand new parades as more animated movies came out, and we were trying to synergize all the parks and doing those things. And back then, there was probably, as I recall, probably 12 directors that kind of were the senior leadership of the park at that time. So it was allowing me to kind of understand at the senior level what it's like to balance the business of the company as well as the creative content of the company, and how do you provide the right kind of leadership for both of those things. So it was a great time for me, and I kind of felt like maybe I was getting into a position that I could maybe expand my influence of trying to help us do the right things.
Yeah.
I always think, and you know this well, Mike, there was always a tension between WDI and the entertainment group. But through our mutual friend Dave Burkhart, who you'll speak more about him later, understood the role of entertainment was really, they were a stopgap, because WDI projects take 3 to 5 years, and you can't be nimble, you can't react quickly when a new motion picture comes out, especially like you said, the business of Disney was synergy. We got the Hunchback just came out. We need to, capitalize on that and do something. WDI often, I think it was the trepidation of spending the millions and millions to develop, an attraction, a ride or whatever. But you guys were nimble. You were able to come in, put the show out there, and in many ways, that was the company mission. It was all about the synergy, getting it out there. And then sometimes, if the product had legs, then it would turn into a ride. But that was a good lesson for me, and I think a lesson a lot of WDI never really got.
Well, I think, and I have to very quickly tell you, last Saturday night at the Thea Awards, at the gala, I had a chance I saw him, and I ran over to talk to Tony Baxter.
Yeah.
And Tony and I were never, directly impacting, but I know that his job and the job of all of his colleagues at WDI was to maintain this beautiful design of the park. And I remember talking to John Cora and Bob Galt and some of the people in Jim Cora that ran the parks from an operational perspective, of saying, you have to remember that every day we come to work, your job is to deliver the perfect SOP. Mine is not. Mine is to change the park and have it feel vibrant and new and exciting every day. So at Hello, we're pretty much going to be in conflict, right?
Yeah.
So we have to kind of work our ways through understanding that both those things can exist if we work together. Live entertainment provided, yes, a quick and much more efficient way of synergizing a brand new product. No question about it. At the same time, we created a human connection, whether it's a character interaction, a band on the street, sitting in a stage show, that a lot of people don't get to Broadway. They never get to see those kind of things in a live situation. So I always felt like we were part of the buffet. We were an important part of the buffet. Maybe we weren't considered back then the entree. We weren't the carved beef, but we were something that was there to help balance out and bring the park to life beyond just the BGM music. And so that was a little bit of a conflict sometimes in what we were asked to do against some of the beliefs that WDI felt we should be doing. But it always seemed to work out. And I think I was remembering that I think we did, in our first circus event, we did the Globe of Death in the hub, which upset a lot of people. Of course, at the time, people thought that, I'd made that decision by myself. I did not make that decision by myself. That had to go through all types of management for everybody to say that would be an exciting thing. But clearly, I think Marty and Tony and a bunch of people felt like that was it's just short of blasphemy of putting something in front of Walt's Castle. So, and then we had the gift giver extraordinaire with an elevator that came up almost like a game show for the 35th, I think the 30th anniversary, maybe the 35th. And so as it worked out, that's where the Walt and Mickey statue got put there. I think the elevator got filled with concrete, and it was ensured that we would never, ever put anything in the hub again. So,
but I want to say, I think what you started to establish was the importance of that castle as a backdrop, and the hub as an entertainment spot for the parks. And when you think about, I think about like in Tokyo, we actually redesigned the hub so that it could become an entertainment spot for the park. When they designed Paris, the hub became a spot for the park. And I'm sure every park since then. Well,
Disney Hollywood Studios, they destroyed by putting that stupid hat in front of the hub for years.
But my point is, there was a beauty to that spot, an importance to that spot that people couldn't deny. And I think even though the earlier stuff might have been looked at in kind of a negative light, I think it kind of paved the way for everybody understanding that, no, we need to honor this spot as a great place for live entertainment.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I was at Disneyland again this last weekend on Saturday and saw the Lion King show that's in the Fantasyland Theater that was originally Videopolis. Back in the day, right?
I love Videopolis.
And it's the same type of story. Frequently, parks now are designing for live entertainment, but a lot of times they don't provide enough space based upon what management is asking. So we're constantly trying to retrofit staging situations within a park, trying to be respectful of the environment and all the creative work that's gone into that, but at the same time, matching management's request to do a big show that a lot of people can see.
So that's the segue, Mike, because now there was this
1991, I think we're in.
And Jack Lindquist has this idea to do something on the river.
Well, no, actually, what we were doing, we went to Orlando for a big presentation, and this was right after the company had acquired the Muppets brand. And so Jack, who was the greatest creative, just short of crazy idea executive that you just loved, because he was always outside the box thinking, just a tremendous guy to be around. He had an idea that the Muppets would take over Disneyland, that the Matterhorn be painted green as a tribute to Kermit. Kermit and Miss Piggy would take in, Mickey and Minnie would be kicked out, and they would go on a national, almost like whistle stop tour to try to gain the public support that they be reinstated. So, in 25 words or less, that was kind of what the gist of it was, of how we were going to welcome the Muppets into the Disney branding. And then 2 or 3 days before we made the presentation in Orlando, unfortunately, Jim Henson died. So we went into the meeting with Michael and Dick Nunes and others, and realizing, well, that's not going to work. The company's in total shock and disarray, and that's just not going to make any sense. So why don't you get back to me in a few weeks, try to get some other ideas, because we've got to do something in 1992. And so I made a call at that time to Barnett Ritchie, who was our senior show director at Disneyland, and had done so many wonderful productions over the year. And we'd always done a thing in May called Disneyland and All That Jazz, where we would have country night, pop night, jazz night, and we would put in a portable floating stage on the end of Tom Sawyer's Island. And the Mark Twain would come by at the end, maybe with some kids and sparklers and stuff. And we kind of had always thought about maybe someday we could maybe do a more permanent big show out there. So I had called Barnett and I said, this may be the opening. This may be the window, because we got to go fast. And I know you've thought about this for a long time. And I said, I'll be back in a few days. Please put some ideas together. And sure enough, in her brilliant creative mind and her experience at Disneyland, she put together that first design of Fantasmic. And then we had a chance to go back and present the concept, which they liked. And then we got, as typical corporate, we got the approval for the next phase, the next phase, the next phase.
And it was called Imagination originally?
Yes. Barnett, working with a great musical guy, Bruce Healy, who was our music director at Disneyland for a long time, created a song that's still in the show. I saw it Friday night, just short of its 31st anniversary, May 13th. That show been there 31 years. And, it starts out imagination. And that was quoted because that was the title of the show. It was about Mickey's imagination.
Right.
When it started going through all the churns that it goes through, including marketing and Michael, they felt that was too soft. It didn't ring true as a title for a show. So after a couple of different versions of different things, one being phantasmagorical, we finally ended up with Fantasmic as the title. And that probably got decided in February of 92 before we opened in May. So I've actually got some marketing materials that went out, early first marketing materials that says imagination.
Oh, wow.
And then I got switched
So was there any pushback at the time of putting Fantasyland characters into Frontierland in New Orleans Square?
No, I don't recall that being an issue. I think people felt that this was about Mickey's imagination. It can happen any place in Disneyland. And it's a nighttime spectacular. The only thing about Frontierland that was an absolute design criteria was that it's important to get everybody that's involved in approving and working on a project to understand the design intent. And then you mold your ideas to that design intent. Otherwise, you're creating wonderful stuff you love, and then you're going to cut it, move it, change it around. And if you've got a good, solid design intent, and the design intent, and Dave Burkhart, you mentioned him earlier, what a terrific, creative, and friendly, workable partner he was at Disneyland. Dave knew that we had to make sure that during the day, that whatever we did at night would not impact Tom Sawyer's Island, the canoes, the riverboat, the Columbia, the Mark Twain, all those things had to operate. So that's why we drained the river. And you may have seen the one photo of a big construction piece of equipment and a bunch of people wearing hard hats. Myself, Barnett Ritchie, Bruce, Bob McTire, Don Dorsey. Yeah, if you go from on my screen with the red helmet, that's Bruce, Bob McTire, Barnett Ritchie, myself, Gary Gaskin, Don Dorsey, Tom Butch, and John Menching. And we had to make sure that whatever special effects we put were on lifts under the water, didn't affect the tracking, didn't affect people exploring Tom Sawyer's Island during the day. And then at night, you got that transformation that allowed the lighting towers to come up in the New Orleans Square and around the edge of Frontierland. And all of that was to make sure that Tomorrowland stayed pristine.
Wow.
Yeah, I think it was probably set the standard for creating experiences in the park that allowed the park to be the park and then become something else.
Yeah.
And I remember being we were across the park working on Toontown. I remember walking over there and seeing the river drain. That was the cool thing about working in
right.
being able to walk the park after hours there, but also being able to see things in these processes that the guests don't get to see.
Yeah. Was that picture where you stand on the ground of the river?
Yeah, the lagoon had been drained and they were starting to cut off the end of Tom Sawyer's Island so that we could put the 3-story effects facilities together that the dragon would come out of the pit and all of that. I remember telling people, again, through the remainder of my career, because I learned so much from Fantasmic, was that was a very typical situation where you had to sell the show to get the facility. There's no way ever that myself or anybody else could have gone into Michael and Jeffrey and Frank at the time and said, I'd love for you to cut off the end of Tom Sawyer's Island, drain the lagoon for 9 months, put up construction walls, and build a really great facility so we can do an awesome show. That's just never going to happen. But because we said, here's the show concept, I love that. How are you going to do that? Well, to be able to do that, we have to cut off the end of Tom Sawyer's Island. We have to do these things, but it will be restored into pristine condition to where it will look like nothing ever happened. But we have to go through 9 to 10 months of some pretty ugly construction. And of course, anytime you're changing out an attraction or adding something, that's common in a theme park. And so that was our first entree at Disneyland of really doing something that was massive production that required that type of commitment to make the park feel in a big way that something was missing, but something even better was coming.
Yeah. So huge success with Fantasmic, 1992. About 8 years later, a lot of fun things happening in the world and the park. And you guys did another show called Light Magic. Tell us about that one.
Light Magic. Well, interesting story. Light Magic came from a request that we had made the decision a few years earlier that we were going to end the Main Street Electrical Parade. And you may recall that as part of a public promotion and public service, we sold all the light bulbs as raising.
Yes.
Right?
So how did it ever come back?
And that was thought to be, you know, a nice farewell. As a matter of fact, I had worked with Al Flores, who was running our media group at Disneyland at the time, and we filmed the last season of the Electrical Parade and then turned it into a home video, of which they sold a lot of them because it looked like it was the farewell, because we were selling the light bulbs. And so replace it. And so I'm sure you know the name Steve Davison, who was one of the younger art directors and designers on our staff at that time, had worked on a concept about ELP, Electric Light Parade 2000, which was using new technologies of lighting, not just the twinkle lights that typically were involved in the Electrical Parade back in its inception in 1972. And so we presented the ideas to marketing, and at the time, the word was, "Hey kid," and I won't mention the names, but I always hated being called kid at that time. But "Hey kid, new and improved doesn't sell. It's got to be completely different." So the design criteria was so that it's not compared to the Electrical Parade. It can't just be a standard night parade. So with Light Magic, we did a couple of things. We created a new story from scratch, trying to embrace with Pixies the kind of magic of Tinkerbell's extended family, right? We were using film cabinets to project with 70mm film, like in Fantasmic, on floats that would stop in the street for a celebration, right? Again, it was a street party, not a parade. It parades into position, but it's really a street show. And that was part of the design criteria, to try to make it different than the parade. And we thought we were making, and of course, we were using fiber optics in a large way that had never been used quite that way, particularly on battery operated moving floats. And they were humongous. We were actually, the drive units were the kind of tractors that you see that pull airplanes around tarmacs because of the weight. And so we were pretty excited. And once again, Light Magic was approved by everybody in the company as an exciting new concept. But of course, you have to deliver the concept and it has to work. And so, unfortunately, in my estimation, we did an annual pass holder preview, which was very early in the annual pass holder life of doing events for them. And we really weren't ready. And we had said the show is really not ready to put in front of an audience. But there was a lot of pressure that, in fact, we had to do this event. And we did. And it was at the beginning of the internet, where people could communicate in that way and be more instantaneous. And so that's when we found out that public reviews from the internet, which go out very quickly, can either be terrific or very damaging. And because we had some technical issues that night, and it wasn't a good first show with a lot of our Disney annual pass holders that care deeply at that time, as I'm sure they do today, about the park, but very strongly opinionated. Many of them didn't like it, and the louder voices were the dislikes. There are a lot of people that wrote lovely letters about how their children dreamed of that when they would go to sleep at night, and they would talk to their parents about how they remembered the Pixies, and they hoped that in their dreams they would see them. And so we were kind of feeling like it would be okay, but we never really recovered. And that show ran its one summer, and then it was dismantled, and that was the end. And it was a very painful experience. But I think more than anything, what it taught me, which my dad taught me a long time ago, is that when you get knocked down, you got to get back up. That's when you prove to yourself and to others that you still have something inside you that you can offer that has great value. And so the actual team that had worked on that show that felt very defeated at that time, the next thing that I put them on was the the Christmas lights at Small World, which I think just had its 26th anniversary, 25th anniversary this last year, still running as a part of the Christmas holiday package at Disney. So
Yeah.
Light Magic, as a former boss at Universal told me, nobody bats 1,000. And if you use the baseball analogy, if you bat 400, you're in the Hall of Fame, which means you fail 6 times out of 10. But the most important thing is that, if you're going to lead in the industry, you got to try. You got to take a risk. You have to take a risk, which led me to Bob Yanni, who had just left the summer before I started in October of 1978, was still kind of sending notes out to people. And he sent a note out, and he would always sign it, Bob Yanni, and at the bottom he would go, "Dare to Dream." And I thought,
wow.
How cool is that he's got his own little motto that he puts in all of his handwritten notes. So for years, I tried to do handwritten notes because I think people appreciate that, right? And I said, but what's my Bob Yanni thing? What's my thing? And so in a very clumsy way, I ended up with my 3 R's. Reward is a risk realized. And for me, that meant that to do the stuff that I know I can do is good. Everybody likes to be successful. But if you talk about something that really affects you in a deeper way to go on, to keep challenging yourself, it's when you take a risk. It's got to be a calculated risk. But that's where the true reward comes in, is when you've realized the risk that you took paid off. And so, Light Magic taught me not to quit. Light Magic taught me some great lessons about how to put a show together, when to have it ready for the public. And I just think as much as in the beginning of the internet, if you ever looked me up when the internet was new, first thing it said was Light Magic. Horrible show, big failure, and that kind of burned me for a while. But I still have a Light Magic baseball cap that I keep, and I look at it every so often, like that folder that you showed. And that's to remind me that failure is not the last step. It's okay to be defeated. Nobody bats 1,000. You just get up and you go after the next thing. And so for that, I'm thankful for Light Magic with hindsight perspective.
Well, you did. Then you went on to a lot of new great things, because I think we're in 2000, and Dave Burkhardt, who you worked on with on Fantasmic, is now at Universal. And I guess he called you and you jumped ship.
Yeah, I made the move after 21 years at Disney. I moved over to Universal, and Dave was instrumental in suggesting me to their HR staff to come in as their head of entertainment, which I did. I thought I was going over there for 2 years to kind of help them get open. Stayed for 12 in Japan, and then finally ended up working for them for 22 years.
Wow. So speaking of Japan, we earlier talked about that little piece of kanji over your shoulder there.
Yes.
What does it say?
Well, this is, let's see, I'll see if I can move my camera over here and make sure everybody can see it. That is something that I had Sarah-san, who was one of the members of our staff in Japan, who taught the skill of doing kanji and katakana. And probably just a couple of weeks into my job and into the office, I asked her, would you please do something that is in the Japanese symbols that translates to fun? And so she did that for me. And then I very purposely posted it at the exit to my office door. And my hope and my intent was that, and I would always tell the staff, no matter what happens in my office in a meeting, we've had a great meeting, a bad meeting. The budget went up, the budget went down. The creative got changed, the creative stays the same. Whatever dynamic happened in that office, when you leave here, the last thing I want you to see is the word fun. That's the business we're in. That's what the guests expect. And they're never going to really get the full volume of fun if we don't have fun in creating. And it's corporate, it's pressure, it's deadlines, it's relationships. There's so many things that can get in the way. But don't forget, it's about creating fun experiences. And I would see it all day long to remind me in my leadership role, but they would see it only on the way out. And so I was hoping symbolically somehow it would stick with them. And then when I retired last year, I cleared out my offices in Beijing and in Orlando, where I had some things, and in Osaka. And that's one of the things I wanted to make sure that I had it here in my home office.
Wow.
Wow.
So that's amazing. But let's look up a few inches and tell us the amazing story of how you worked with Steven Schwartz to have the only mini version of Wicked in a theme park on Earth. That's an amazing accomplishment.
I'll go back to Light Magic gave me some chutzpah and the ability to assume that the worst thing anybody ever says to you is no. And so I did an old-fashioned thing. Some of the staff had been to New York and seen Wicked, talked about it. I saw Wicked, and then we were taking the Western Land at USJ when it opened, and we're going to convert it for the 5th anniversary because it wasn't that popular. So working with our Universal creative designers, Randy Barnett was there at the time, a great colleague, and we created that the Western Land would become the Land of Oz. And we envisioned a yellow brick road, and we envisioned at the end of the land where we'd had a Wild Wild West stunt show, we would retheme that to the Emerald Theater, and we would be presenting the Broadway spectacular musical Wicked. But because I had done the 30-minute version of Beauty and the Beast at Disneyland, where we started like the cliff notes of a novel, where we started with Belle in the bookshop, and we just kind of took the primary musical numbers and kind of short story quickly went through the major components. And we had done that with the Hunchback Festival of Fools, and we had done that with Pocahontas. And so we had done that with the animated classics. And so we said, let's do a 30-minute version of that. And so I found out that Mark Platt, who was the lead person on Wicked, had also been involved at Universal in the film division, and was quite an industry guy that, quite honestly, I didn't know because I wasn't in that part of the business. And through some help of Michael Silver, who was our chief legal counsel for Universal theme parks at the time, now president of some of the new business things that we're chasing, he set up for me to get a phone call with Mark Platt. So I did an old-fashioned cold call, and I just, it was pre-planned. I didn't just completely cold call, but he knew I was calling. And I called and said, hi, my name's Mike. I'm calling from Japan. We're doing a new thing here, changing the land out to the Land of Oz, because the theme that year was Here Stories Are Retold. And the Japanese knew about the Oz books and knew that story, right, about the Wizard of Oz. So we thought that was something we could change into. And I said, I'd like to do a 30-minute version, because anything longer than 30 minutes in a version in a theme park, people tend to not want to stay. And wondered if you would give that a consideration. I've done that with animated films, so we've condensed it, and I think we could do that. And he said, well, you know, we thought about that, but not sure. And I said, and I have to be very honest, I said, I can't pay Broadway directors, Broadway designers. I mean, I don't have that kind of a budget. I have very talented people that we can use that I think will treat the creative correctly. But if that's the only way you would do it, then I'm sorry to waste your time, and we can end the call, because I just want to be honest with you. That's not going to happen. He says, well, let me think about it. And he called back in about 8 or 10 weeks and said, you know, we're kind of interested. How quickly could you have a proposal together? And I called Michael Silver, and we said, we'll be there in 10 days. So we came in and showed artwork and stuff. And then Michael helped negotiate the contract. And the next thing you know, we were doing it.
Wow.
And we worked, and we did, as part of the contract, we decided, and I decided this pretty early on, I wasn't going to have any kind of a writer try to rewrite Steven Schwartz's stuff. So I said, we would like to commission Steven to condense it to 30 minutes, which he was excited to do, and did it for a very reasonable price. And so that way, you know, he was deciding to cut off the third finger of the left hand, not me or anybody else. Right? He could make those decisions. So that's kind of how it came to be. And then it ran for, I think, 5.5 years.
Wow. That's a good run by That's very
that's pretty good.
Wow. So you had so many other great accomplishments. I know my friend Bart Cressa worked with you on some of these projection mapping shows. You had drones. You had. Tell us some of the other.
You were at the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Applying new.
Yeah, you worked with Michael Curry. Tell us about some of these stories.
Well, listen, I think that again that goes back to if you want to play the game and you want to lead, you got to lead, which means you got to take a couple of risky chances of trying to push the envelope. What I've always tried to do is say, is there existing technology that I can modify for our usage versus trying to say, I want to invent drones. So we were taking drones, and frequently, as an example, drones today are obviously used as like points of light that are almost like a dot matrix to create something in the sky, whether it's written script or some soccer ball at World Cup or whatever, right? I started wanting to use drone as a lifting device to be able to create something in the sky. So what we did was, this was an early test, which we were not able to complete, but I was trying to do flying angels. So this is a lightweight framework with a drone above the head, with a mannequin head, very light, somewhat rigid structure. And then the next slide may show what it's like when you light it with downlight. And then if you'll notice up in the sky, you wouldn't be able to see the drones because they were all black into a night sky. So the intention was to be able to have, when we were doing our Christmas Angel show, is to have these things take off and fly around in the sky, because it was the gift of angels, right? Yeah. We've ended up using them on lifts over the years, which has also been very dramatic, but it was those types of things. We wanted to have flying dementors. So we worked with Michael Curry to put together a lightweight carbon fiber 14.5-foot dementor that we had drones attached to the shoulders and stuff. Here I am with Michael up in Portland when we're working out the scale of it. And this was flying over the back area of the Black Lake of Harry Potter by the castle for one of our shows that we did. And again, free flight was a little bit challenging. So we actually had it on a deep sea fishing rod with 200-pound test line that you couldn't see, but it was also slightly tethered. So it would come up and move around, and then we would kind of reel it back in like a big marlin. But the whole point was to say, how can we do stuff different? That was what we always wanted. We wanted to lead in some fashion. And in the effects way, using projection mapping as a way to change the scenic versus it being, in the early days, a lot of projection mapping was like on an old government building where the eagle turns into a sunburst that then turns into a floating waterfall into with beautiful music. And it was an experiential thing. And we wanted to use it more as storytelling. So we started with Pawnee slide projectors, and then eventually got into projection mapping with video where we could tell the story better. And at the end of the day, it's all about telling the story.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Wow.
That's the T2 building. That's the outside of the T2. And we changed it into, in the very first version, we changed it into the streets of Paris because we were doing a romantic story, and we wanted to find, the Japanese loved Christmas time as a time of romance, a lot of weddings. And so we decided to create an original story that was simply, first I found out from travel agents, where do the Japanese go if they go out of town on the holidays? And they either went to New York or Paris. So we thought, we'll project Paris. And what would be a great story for Paris? The gal, Melissa, worked in the gift shop at the Louvre Museum, and Andrew was a tour guide, and they kind of had a thing for each other, but they never talked about it. So in 18.5 minutes, they somehow connected. And it was at the Christmas party, the holiday party, during the angel exhibit, to tie in with the angels, that they connected. So we connected a love story. We connected the angels to the Louvre Museum in Paris. So we were trying to do the research to connect those dots. That the first rule of show business is know your audience. And anybody that worked for me knows how much I preach that you don't do this yourself, you do it for the people that are buying the ticket. And that's how we did a little research to find out what it was that consumer, that guest, would feel during the holiday period, so that you could make that proper emotional connection.
Wow. And then your last project at Universal Japan was an Optimus
Well,
Prime
we did a
that
big
grew up.
nighttime parade called the Universal Spectacle Night Parade. And
Okay.
we had to create a way to do 4 different IPs that was delivering 4 different audio packages, because the music that goes with those floats, and this was the Harry Potter where we had the Hogwarts Express train and some push units, and it was a big TEA winner in 2019. And we spent about 4 years on this project, and it's ginormous. And of course, if you're going to do that franchise, Optimus Prime, Transformers, and we always talked about this, they call the movie Transformers because things transform.
Right.
So you have to do that. I mean, we could do big floats that had various of the Transformers, but at least one's got to transform. So we were able to find a variety of vendors that not many were willing to try, but we just kept persisting and pursuing, and finally got to where we had the Peterbilt truck that Optimus Prime in 32 seconds on a moving float on batteries comes up and then repositions and goes up and down and comes out during the moving parade. So again, trying to push that envelope on the dynamic things that a parade could do.
Yeah, wow. So you were going to retire just a few years ago, I guess, and just like in The Godfather 3, I guess they pulled you back in. What happened there, Mike?
Well, I had thought that I'd always said to myself and to my wife and close friends that, I just don't want to be one of those guys that stays at the dance too long, that maybe tries to do one more encore when the audience really isn't looking for any more encores. They'd like to get to the parking lot. And so I kind of thought maybe I had done my 2-year assignment at USJ, had turned at that point into about 17 years, and that maybe it was time. And so, and I got a call from our chairman at the time, Tom Williams, and I was in Florida. He wanted to meet with me and talked about, I heard maybe you're thinking about retiring. I'd love for you to stay on and help us with the Beijing project. And you don't say no to the Godfather. and Tom had been enormously supportive for my career when I moved to Universal in 2000. And so I agreed to stay on and try to help on the development side of helping find the right staff to do that, and working with Mark Woodbury's staff and Terry Koo and of course Mike Hightower, who recently retired. And they were so gracious to welcome me into that team, not being a part of Universal Creative, but at that time the SVP of International and Executive Producer for International Entertainment. They knew of my work, and they thought I could add some value in helping to guide that process on the live entertainment side. So I stayed with that project until we opened in 2021. And then in 2022, I did take a bow. I did exit stage left, and it's been a year now. And I miss the people, and I miss the fun and the dynamics of creating. But I've also found that it's good to let others, Jason Ramsberg, who's our VP of Entertainment in Beijing, and Dan Mitchell, who's the SVP in Osaka, that they should have the same opportunity for the great life I've had by stepping aside and letting them shine. And they're both doing a great job, and I continue to wish them all the best.
Well, Mike, that statement I think kind of sums up who you are. It was always about, you saw the big picture. You're always able to rise above and see it from a level that others may not have seen it, and that I think that speaks so much to your character.
Yeah.
Well, listen, I appreciate that. I know one of the things that I've tried to impart to all the management people that I work with is that it's a team sport. And maybe you're asked to be the quarterback, and maybe on the next project you're asked to be the center, which is keep your head down and a lot of people hit you. Whatever it is, I always told the staff that anytime I went into a big meeting, I said, listen, I wear a flak jacket every day. I'm the first guy in the room. I'll take the first hit. Anybody gets on you, I will jump in. And I just felt that part of leadership is to work with, and when needed, protect the team, protect the creative, balance it with business, because it is a business. And at some point, there are very stringent and well-defined success formulas that you have to follow. But it doesn't mean that you can't, dig down deep and try to find new experiences. And most important for me was that I wanted to minimize the body count of broken or bruised or scarred relationships when you get to the finish line. Because success is great. There's no question about it. It's better than failure, right? But it's the process that you go through. It's the experience of the colleagues and the vendors and all the people that you work with, and their ideas dovetail with your ideas and the ideas of others. It really is all those things coming together. And when you can put the right people together on the right team and enjoy that process, and oh, by the way, the bonus is it was successful, then you've done all the right things.
Yeah. And my congratulations on your Thea Award last Saturday for the show Untrainable at Universal Studios Beijing. And you worked with our friends at Hasbas.
Sylvia Hasse and Steve Bass, yes. Yep. Yes, and all of our, for years, working with Bob Wackerman and Paul Freeman at Audio by the Bay, and just so many great colleagues and vendors. Creative Technologies, when we were working on the Dragon, I remember very early on saying, you can put this out to bid all you want, but I'm telling you that, in my opinion, there's only one company on the planet that I think has shown that they have the skill level to maybe do this, because they've done it in arenas, but not necessarily interacting with actors on the stage and all of that. And so many great worldwide partners take the flying system. We just had so many wonderful people come together for this production. We were very happy with the results, and it seems to be still getting rave reviews from the guests in Beijing.
Yeah, wow, we got to stop and see it.
So, Mike, we're at that point in our journey now where we ask the big question.
Yes.
Yep.
What is it that makes an experience timely
yet timeless?
And timeless. Well, I think the majority of the burden is on timely. If you do timely right, it will be timeless. And so I think you have to, I believe, at least in the entertainment perspective, I think, as I said before, you got to know your audience. That's critical before you start the process. Don't just be doing something because I've always wanted to do it myself. Understand why you are doing this and who you're doing it for. Make sure you have a strong and, I think, simple story. Because I think in a theme park, people, how many rides can I do in a day? How many shows can I see? How many characters can I meet? Right? So don't try to give them War and Peace. Try to have something that is simple, right? Try to touch key emotions, the emotional connection. And that's what we were always able to do so much with our music, is that particularly in a foreign country where language is a burden, music somehow touches people consistently on the planet, right? So try to find those ways to make those emotional connections. And then to be timeless, if it's a story that always is connecting emotionally, and it must be easily accessible to all generations. So that timelessness comes because a grandparent, a teenager, every generation can find some nugget that touches them. Try to get all the senses, because I think that's where the emotion comes from. And I think that's what people really want when they go to a theme park for an experience. They want to feel emotion. They want that escape that we've always talked about. And, try to make sure that whatever emotion you're going to touch is something that you think falls into that category of triggering a memory, because that's why people come back. I mean, people go back to Fantasmic after 31 years. The show has changed over time, but for the most part, it's the same thing. Why do you listen to your favorite CD over and over and over again?
Right.
Because it's touched you in a memory. I was in school, I had a relationship, something. Those lyrics speak to where I think I want to go in my life. And so to me, those are those key little nuggets. And if you get that right when you're doing something that happens to be timely because it's relevant and it's current, I think you have the very best success of it transitioning very smoothly into being timeless.
Yeah, excellent answer.
Mike, you have given us a master class today on how to be a great creative, a great leader, but more importantly, a great human being.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you all very much. Ryan, Joe, what a pleasure.
Thank you.
Great.
Well, we're going to go off. You want to go see Fantasmic when it first opened back in '92? All right.
Set the controls. Here we go.
Thank you, Mike. Bye, everybody. Good to see everybody. We'll see you in the next one.
Oh my goodness. Thank you guys so much for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the ride. And thanks so much to our friend Mike Davis for time traveling with us today. If you have questions for Mike, stick around for an off-the-record Q&A in just 60 seconds. So on behalf of Zeitgeist Design and Production, we thank you for spending an hour of your day with us on the Spirit of the Time Zoomcast. If you enjoyed our journey, then please check out all 23 of our time travel adventures with industry icons on our YouTube channel or under the Zoomcast section at zeitgeist-usa.com. They're also available as an audio-only podcast wherever you listen. Please plan now to join us on Friday, May 26th, when our time machine passenger will be Eric Jacobson, the elusive former Senior Vice President of Creative Development at Walt Disney Imagineering, who is behind some of Disney's most beloved attractions, including Star Tours, Splash Mountain, The Great Movie Ride, and Tower of Terror, and worked with our own Ryan Harmon on the Disney MGM Studios theme park in the late 1980s. May your tomorrow have the nostalgia of the past, the wonder of the present, and the promise of the future. Stay tuned. We will be right back.
Get it.